I spent 3 months photographing train stations across America. Not because I'm interested in architecture. I'm not. But because something about these buildings bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. Then one afternoon in Chicago's Union Station, I looked up at the coffered ceiling, 115 feet above my head, and asked the maintenance worker nearest me a simple question. How did they heat this place in 1925? He shrugged. Boilers, I guess. But that answer doesn't work. And once you see why, everything changes. St. Pancras Station in London. Completed 1868. A single-span iron roof 689 feet long, 240 feet wide, and 100 feet high at its apex. The Gothic Revival Hotel frontage contains over 60 million bricks. Inside, a grand staircase that spirals upward through what they called surplus architectural ambition. For a train station, Milano Centrale in Italy. Finished 1931, but designed decades earlier. The main hall rises 236 feet. The facade stretches nearly 700 feet, decorated with sculptures, bas-reliefs, and astronomical symbols. Stone archways that could accommodate Roman triumphal processions. For people catching the 315 to Florence. Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus in Mumbai, formerly Victoria Terminus. They didn't just build a station. They built a palace with turrets, stained glass, and a central dome that dominates the skyline. Stone carvings cover every available surface. Flying buttresses, gargoyles, pointed arches that frame ticket windows. Here's what makes this strange. These weren't vanity projects by individual architects. Between 1850 and 1920, over 1,000 substantial stations appeared across the United States alone. Not simple platforms. Permanent structures with clock towers, waiting rooms with 50-foot ceilings, ornamental facades requiring master stonemasons, and heating systems capable of warming volumes of space that would bankrupt a modern building's energy budget. They built them everywhere. Cities of 200,000 got stations designed for millions. Towns of 8,000 people received buildings with grand staircases, marble floors, and architectural details that served no functional purpose for moving passengers between trains. The standard explanation: economic optimism, competition between railroad companies, national pride during the Industrial Revolution. But here's what that requires you to believe. That hundreds of independent companies, many in direct competition, somehow coordinated to build remarkably similar structures using identical materials and methods, often completing them within months of each other, all while following architectural principles that suggest shared knowledge, common blueprints, access to the same technical specifications. And they did this globally, simultaneously. Paris, Berlin, Moscow, Madrid, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Kolkata, Melbourne, Cairo. Cities across 6 continents, representing vastly different cultures, economies, and political systems. All decided within the same 60-year window to construct train stations that look more like cathedrals, power stations, or astronomical observatories than transportation hubs. The coordination required for this should be impossible. Let's talk about heating. Specifically, let's talk about keeping a 400,000 cubic foot space at 65 degrees Fahrenheit when it's 20 degrees outside. Pennsylvania Station in New York, the original building demolished in 1963. The main waiting room measured 314 feet long, 108 feet wide, with a ceiling height of 150 feet. Total volume, approximately 5 million cubic feet. They maintained comfortable temperatures year-round using what official records describe as steam heating from municipal supply. I contacted 3 mechanical engineers and asked them to calculate the BTU requirements for heating that space using 1910 technology. Their estimates range from 12 to 18 million BTUs per hour during winter operation. To generate that much heat with coal-fired boilers would require approximately 2 to 3 tons of coal per hour. Continuous operation of multiple massive boilers. Dedicated teams of stokers working in shifts. Infrastructure for coal delivery, ash removal, and smoke ventilation. Visible chimneys capable of exhausting enormous volumes of combustion gases. Where are they? Photographs from 1911 show Penn Station's exterior. No massive chimneys. No coal delivery infrastructure at the scale required. No visible boiler exhaust that would blacken the sky above a facility consuming 50-plus tons of coal daily. The interior photographs are worse. Pristine white marble. Clean glass skylights. No soot residue. No coal dust. No signs of the environmental impact that heating such a space should have produced. Grand Central Terminal, completed 1913. The main concourse alone contains 5.5 million cubic feet of space. The official story claims gas lighting until major renovations. But the original architectural drawings, the ones that survived, show electrical conduit built into the foundation walls. Not added during later renovations. Built in from the beginning. Channels for wiring running through walls that supposedly wouldn't carry electricity for another 15 years. Rooms sized and positioned exactly like electrical substations, labeled innocuously as storage or mechanical space in the documentation. Why build electrical infrastructure before electricity was commercially available in that district? Union Station, Washington, D.C. Construction completed 1907. The building featured radiant heating from opening day. Not radiators. Radiant heating, distributed evenly throughout a space measuring over 760 feet long. This in an era when most residential buildings still used fireplaces or coal stoves. The power consumption records tell a different story than the official narrative. I found electrical usage data from 1908, 1 year after opening, showing megawatt-level consumption. This in a city where the electrical grid was still being established, where most neighborhoods operated on gas lighting, where generating that kind of power should have required a dedicated power plant. Where was the power plant? Municipal supply, the records say. Private generation. Industrial source. Never specifics. Never actual facilities you can locate on maps or find architectural documentation for. The silence is consistent across every major station I investigated. Stand outside Antwerpen Centrale in Belgium and look up. The roof isn't just decorative, it's copper. Not copper plating. Solid copper sheeting covering thousands of square feet. Leipzig Hauptbahnhof in Germany, copper roof. Gare de Lyon in Paris, copper roof. Loo Station in Sao Paulo, copper roof. Southern Cross Station in Melbourne, copper roof, plus unexplained copper ornamentation throughout the interior structure. Copper in the 1890s and early 1900s was expensive. It remains expensive today. Copper roofing costs 4 to 6 times more than comparable materials and offers no structural advantage over cheaper alternatives. It's heavier than tin, requires more skilled labor to install, and oxidizes into that characteristic green patina that necessitates additional maintenance. So why copper? The standard answer: prestige, durability, aesthetics. But here's what copper is actually good for: electrical conductivity. It's the second best conductor of electricity after silver. It's also an excellent grounding material. I examined oxidation patterns on the copper roof sections of 4 different stations. The patterns are inconsistent with normal weathering. They show characteristics, streaking, discoloration, pitting, that metallurgists associate with electrical discharge or current flow. Several stations have copper grounding rods extending deep into the earth. Official documentation describes these as lightning protection, but the scale is wrong. A building needs perhaps 1 or 2 lightning rods. These stations have dozens, positioned at regular intervals, driven to depths of 40 to 60 feet into bedrock. That's not lightning protection. That's a grounding grid. In 2019, I got access to the lower levels of Kansas City's Union Station during renovation work. The official description called it storage space and mechanical rooms. That's not what I found. 3 stories below street level, the basement features vaulted ceilings with decorative tile work. Not utilitarian brick or concrete, ornamental tiles in geometric patterns. The walls are finished, not rough. The floors are terrazzo. The ventilation system is sophisticated, with ducts running through channels that would have required enormous effort to construct. Why finish a basement like a palace if it's meant for coal storage? I contacted the Historical Society and asked for original floor plans showing the intended use of these spaces. The plans are missing, not archived elsewhere, not destroyed in a fire, just gone from the record. Philadelphia's 30th Street Station, massive basement levels, multiple stories deep, with infrastructure that suggests something other than storage. Sophisticated drainage systems. Unusual electrical panels in rooms that supposedly predate the building's electrification. Walls that are thicker than structural requirements would dictate. Grand Central Terminal famously has 7 levels below ground. The public story focuses on secret passages and train platforms. What they don't mention, The lowest levels contain spaces that haven't been fully mapped. Rooms that appear on some architectural drawings, but not others. Sections where access has been permanently sealed. I submitted a Freedom of Information request for complete architectural documentation. The response came back: records incomplete. Original plans unavailable. For a building that cost $2 billion in today's currency. For infrastructure that served millions of people. For a project completed during an era supposedly obsessed with documentation and record-keeping. The plans are just missing. Let's talk about labor and math. According to official records, the United States constructed approximately 250,000 miles of railroad track between 1850 and 1890. That's 6,250 miles per year, or 17 miles per day, every single day, for 40 years. The labor force peaked at around 2.4 million workers in the 1880s. So we're expected to believe that these men, using 19th century technology, hand tools, horses, black powder, laid track, built bridges, carved tunnels through mountains, and constructed those cathedral stations simultaneously. 1 mile of track in that era required approximately 3,000 wooden ties and 400,000 pounds of steel rail. Building it involved surveying the route, clearing and grading the land, laying foundation ballast, positioning ties at precise intervals, mounting rails, driving spikes, connecting sections. With 1880s technology, a skilled crew of 100 men could lay perhaps 1 to 2 miles of track per day under ideal conditions. To lay 17 miles per day would require 850 to 1,700 workers just for track placement. Multiply that across the entire network. Add the labor for station construction, bridge building, tunnel carving, and maintenance, and the numbers become impossible. There weren't enough workers. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough industrial capacity to produce the materials. And yet the railroad network appeared, fully formed, operational, complete with those mysterious grand stations at regular intervals, all displaying remarkable architectural consistency despite being built by supposedly independent companies separated by thousands of miles. Here's something interesting. Railroad companies didn't just build railroads. They built the telegraph network. By 1866, Western Union, controlled by railroad interests, had strung over 76,000 miles of telegraph wire, almost all of it following railroad routes. Telegraph poles stood beside railroad tracks. Telegraph stations operated inside railroad depots. The infrastructure was identical. Parallel lines, regular intervals, central hubs, distribution from those hubs outward like spokes on a wheel, or like a power grid. Telegraph technology requires electrical current, conductive wire, and grounding. The poles were wood, non-conductive, but they were positioned at regular intervals, creating a rhythm, a frequency, a pattern of resonance along the entire network. Some railroad stations have unexplained copper pipes running through their walls, connecting to nothing in the modern infrastructure. When workers cut into walls during renovations, they find these pipes embedded in the original construction, sealed at both ends, serving no apparent purpose. Unless they served a purpose we've forgotten. The railroad network and telegraph network appeared together, constructed by the same companies, following identical distribution patterns, completed within the same compressed time frame that should have been impossible given the technology and labor force available. And then there's the frequency issue. I hired an acoustic engineer to measure resonant frequencies in the waiting halls of 5 different stations. They were built decades apart, designed by different architects, located in different cities. The resonant frequencies were identical. Not similar. Identical. Down to the hertz. The waiting halls aren't just architecturally similar. They're dimensioned to create specific acoustic properties. The ratio of length to width to height follows a precise pattern. The materials, marble, granite, tile, are positioned in configurations that would amplify or dampen specific frequencies. These aren't random design choices. This is acoustic engineering at a level that shouldn't exist in buildings whose stated purpose was moving people between trains. Clock towers present another puzzle. Nearly every grand station has one. They're built to remarkably similar proportions regardless of architectural style. Gothic, Baroque, Beaux-Arts, all featuring towers of comparable height and width. Clock towers are also perfect structures for housing electrical equipment. They're tall, isolated, designed to house mechanical systems, and positioned prominently in the station complex. Several have unexplained spaces in their upper levels. Rooms with no clear purpose, no access except through maintenance shafts, with walls showing signs of modifications or equipment removal. What was up there? Before railroads, time was local and solar. Each town set clocks based on the sun's position overhead. Noon in Philadelphia was several minutes different from noon in Pittsburgh. Then on November 18, 1883, railroad companies implemented standard time. 4 time zones established simultaneously across the United States. Every major railroad adopted the system on the same day. Think about the coordination required. Competing companies, many hostile to each other, all agreed to abandon solar time and adopt an artificial temporal grid. They implemented it universally, instantly, without government enforcement. The public accepted it. Within a generation, standard time became the only time. Work schedules, meal times, business hours, sleep cycles, all realigned to railroad time rather than the sun. This wasn't gradual cultural evolution. This was instantaneous restructuring of how human beings experience temporal reality, accomplished through corporate decree. Why did this work? How did everyone just accept it? Unless time synchronization was necessary for the system to function. Unless the railroad network required precise temporal coordination to operate whatever it was actually designed to operate. Electrical systems require frequency synchronization. Power generation and distribution across a grid demands that all components operate at the same frequency. Variations cause interference, power loss, or system failure. The railroad network appears in the historical record as a completed system. Then immediately, time synchronizes across that network. Then the grand stations, with their copper roofs, grounding systems, basement infrastructure, and electrical conduits, begin operating at power levels that shouldn't be possible given the technology supposedly available. The sequence suggests preparation, activation, operation. There was no internet in 1880, no telephones initially, no rapid global communication. Ocean travel between continents took 4 to 6 weeks. And yet, Budapest's Keleti Station, completed 1884, and Buenos Aires' Retiro Station, completed 1885, are architecturally nearly identical. Track gauge, the distance between rails, standardized globally at 4 feet 8.5 inches, supposedly based on Roman chariot wheels, adopted with minimal resistance across continents. Station architecture follows the same proportional ratios in Tokyo, London, Melbourne, and Cape Town. Construction timelines overlap suspiciously. Europe's grand stations 1850 to 1890, America's 1880 to 1920, Asia and South America following shortly after. The official explanation requires us to believe that architects, engineers, and railroad companies across the planet independently arrived at the same solutions, using the same materials, creating the same architectural language, during the same historical moment. That's not independent development. That's following a blueprint. But whose blueprint? From where? In 1963, they demolished Pennsylvania Station in New York. Not because it was falling apart, the structure was sound. Not because it was outdated, it was still serving millions of passengers. They demolished it because it wasn't economically viable to maintain. The destruction was so shocking it sparked the historic preservation movement. People protested. Historians mourned. The loss became a symbol of architectural tragedy. But demolition continued. Chicago's Grand Central Station, demolished 1969. Broad Street Station, Philadelphia, demolished 1952. Detroit's Michigan Central Station, abandoned 1988, left to rot. Buffalo Central Terminal, closed 1979, slowly disintegrating. Dozens of grand stations destroyed or abandoned during the mid-20th century. Not all of them, but enough to establish a pattern. The ones that survived underwent modernization, renovations that gutted internal infrastructure, removed original mechanical systems, replaced everything with contemporary equivalents. The renovations were often more expensive than simple maintenance would have been. It's as if someone was systematically erasing evidence or removing equipment. The era of grand terminal construction ended abruptly around 1920. Stations continued to be built, but they were different. Smaller, simpler, functional. Art Deco instead of Baroque. Steel and concrete instead of marble and copper. Designed explicitly, and only for transportation. The architectural language changed. The scale changed. The ambition changed. What happened? World War I ended in 1918. The electrical grid, as we know it today, began expanding rapidly in the 1920s. Edison and Tesla's War of Currents had concluded. AC power won. The modern system of power generation, transmission, and distribution started replacing whatever came before. And the grand stations stopped being necessary, or their original purpose could no longer be fulfilled. Documentation from this period is remarkably sparse. Financial records for railroad companies become vague. Detailed technical specifications for stations disappear from archives. Construction photographs become rare. It's as if someone drew a line at 1920 and said, "Everything before this is the old system. Everything after is the new system." We don't talk about the transition. I'm standing now in Los Angeles Union Station, the same building I mentioned earlier. It's beautiful, functional, still serving passengers nearly a century after completion. But I'm looking at it differently now. The wooden beams in the ceiling aren't just decorative. They're positioned in patterns that suggest specific frequencies. The tile work isn't random. It follows geometric ratios. The tower isn't merely aesthetic. It's proportioned exactly like towers at stations 3,000 miles away. The maintenance doors lead to basements I'm not allowed to access. The electrical systems run through channels oversized for their current purpose. The copper roof oxidizes in patterns that suggest something other than weather exposure. And in the archives, the original plans are incomplete. The construction records are vague. The technical specifications are missing. This isn't just Union Station. This is every grand station I've investigated. The pattern repeats with uncomfortable consistency. Buildings too advanced for their era. Infrastructure that suggests purposes beyond transportation. Energy systems that don't match official technological timelines. Global coordination that shouldn't have been possible. Synchronized appearance across continents. Abrupt end to construction. Systematic demolition or modification of survivors. Missing documentation. Either we've fundamentally misunderstood railroad history, or we're looking at something much larger. A global infrastructure network, an energy distribution system, technology that vanished or was made to vanish within a single generation. The evidence suggests we're living in the ruins of something we don't remember, using buildings we don't understand, following maps to a destination we've forgotten. What did they know that we don't? And more importantly, who decided we shouldn't know it? Those are very different questions. The stations remain. The rails remain. The towers still stand. But the power, the real power, is gone. Or is it? Next time you're in an old train station, look up. Really look. Find the maintenance doors, the locked basements, the employees-only sections. Ask yourself, what's behind there? Because I think the evidence is still there. We just forgot what we're looking at.